Okay, so I haven't posted in a little while. I'm going to post now about attorneys. So the reason why this post is coming now is because we just did something that if you would have talked to me about it a couple of years ago, I would have said it was amazing, and it turned out to not be so great. We closed a couple of deals where there was no attorney for the seller. So let's explain. One of the major differences in New York is that the title company does not run the deal and run the transaction and disperse the funds. An attorney does. So, um, we get questions all the time saying, "Hey, do you have an investor-friendly title company?" And when someone says that to me, it tells me a few things. It tells me, number one, they've never done a deal in New York. Number two, they've been watching somebody on the internet who tells them how things should happen in most of the country. In New York, when you come to an agreement, when a seller agrees on a price with you, they have to have an attorney draw up the contract. So again, a year ago, if you would have asked me how to close a deal without an attorney, I would have said it's amazing, because that makes life easier. And we had people that said, "Hey, we want to close a deal without an attorney," and we got them to sign an affidavit explaining that they were not being represented, that they understood what that meant, and we closed a couple of deals. So what happened was they were not fun. It was a huge pain in the ass. And I'm going to talk exactly why in a minute. But first, it's important to understand again, uh, it's just the way things work in New York. So I've always felt like if you close a deal where a seller is not represented by an attorney, you do run a risk, even if they've signed an affidavit. If they feel that they've gotten screwed over because you're then assigning the deal to somebody else, which is what happened in both these deals, they could, if they wanted to, and it's a rare thing, they could sue you and say that you took advantage of them. So, um, a couple of things. First of all, you need a good attorney. It's really important that you have an attorney who understands how to assign how investors work. We use some great attorneys. If you want names, we can help you with them. Um, I just spoke to a couple of guys that I really admire that do serious business in New York, and they say the attorney they use doesn't like to assign. I got to tell you, if your attorney says I don't like to assign, your attorney is not, he may be good in a lot of ways, but he's not what you need, because double closing in New York is expensive. It's thousands of dollars. In other places it's nothing, but in New York it's expensive, and we haven't had a problem assigning. But you need an attorney who's confident enough to draw up the paperwork and not have a problem and go and get there in the middle, right? The complicated part of assigning a contract is that whatever obligations you take on when you sign the contract with the seller, those are the obligations or lack of obligations that you're going to have to the buyer. So, for example, and we didn't realize this, if you sign a standard contract with a seller, right, that's drawn up by his attorney that says the place is going to be broom clean and vacant, even though you know that there might be a tenant there or there might be a lot of crap there when they leave, and then you assign that contract to a buyer, you're under obligation to make sure that everything is as it says in that contract, even if you've sort of told the seller they don't have to do it. So you need an attorney that understands when you insert yourself in the middle and assign the contract, exactly what should be in there and what shouldn't be. Obviously, the most important part of it is that a standard contract in New York is not assignable. You're going to have to, when your attorney deals with the seller's attorneys, you have to make sure that that part is crossed out and that the contract is assignable. But you need a really good attorney. Um, So we closed these deals without an attorney, and what happened was that, I mean, our attorney does a lot of closings, right? I mean, I don't know how many they close, maybe 20 a week. They do a lot. Um, so there's a process involved where us as the buyer's attorney or the assignor, um, there are things that the seller's attorney is responsible for. So in these situations, uh, let's say there were open title issues, simple things. Let's say it's, for example, there's an old mortgage that was paid off, but it wasn't satisfied. Or in our case, we had the property was owned in a life estate for the parents who were dead, but you needed copies of the death certificate to show that they were dead. Um, or on one of them, we needed a checklist, which is a list of the checks of how the funds are going to be dispersed. And because there's no attorney, those things weren't taken care of. So it fell on me. I had to deal with it, and it was a pain in the ass. And in general, things weren't explained to them because they had no representation, and it really wasn't good. And I thought if you would have told me again, even 6 months ago, you're going to be able to close some deals without an attorney. I would have thought it'd be great. It wasn't good. It was terrible, in fact. It was bad. They were upset at the closing because they had told me, 6 weeks ago how they wanted the checks. But because if they had an attorney, the attorney would have simply told our attorney, these are how the checks want to be dispersed. But they didn't. They showed up, and it was one check, and they wanted it split between, it was a brother and sister selling. So these are things that I don't want to deal with. I guess if we had a full-time transaction coordinator, maybe they could deal with it, but we don't. So because the process works a certain way in New York, taking the seller's attorney out of the mix puts more crap onto your plate. So that's not good. Now, we have some competitors who very often will tell the seller, well, if you use our attorney, we'll pay for it. And they sort of recommend an attorney that they use. But I know for a fact that what happens in that case is that attorney that's theoretically representing the seller never meets with the seller and really has nothing to do with the seller. And I got to believe that that is a big mess. So we've had situations where we've had sellers who did not have an attorney, and we recommended an attorney to them. We made sure, that attorney made sure, that they signed all the paperwork in front of them, they spoke to them, they understood what was going on. He represented their interests. And we do that on occasion. But what some of our competitors do, I think, is really itching for a bruising because the attorney that's theoretically representing the seller, it really never meets the seller, doesn't know what's going on, and I think it's not a great plan of action. But people do it, and the people that do serious business do it. Again, I wouldn't recommend it. Your main problem is that because there's a standard operating procedure in New York of having an attorney represent the seller, that when that's not the case, like I said, you're open for a lawsuit. You're open for problems. Like I don't want to deal with these deals once we're done with them. I certainly don't want a seller coming back saying, you took advantage of me. I'd rather pay you for an attorney so that he's really represented, who explains things to them and takes care of them. So I don't like when sellers are not happy at the closing. That does happen sometimes, no matter what you do. But having an attorney makes the closing a more standardized process, right? Where our attorney is going to ask the seller's attorney, how do you want the checks? How do you want the funds dispersed? If there's any title issues, so sort of to explain, there are title companies in New York. There needs to be title insurance in every deal. But the title company is there to basically give you a report, show you if there's any problems, right? Like the ones I gave you. Let's say a mortgage that was paid off 10 years ago, but didn't have a satisfaction filed, or an open mortgage where someone has to order a payoff letter. That's something that a seller's attorney would do. Or any kind of title issues, like a lien that may be in their name, things like that. The title company shows it, and the seller's attorney is supposed to take care of it. So when you take the attorney out of the mix, it falls on me or on you if you're doing the deal. So I don't recommend it. I guess, and a year ago I would have said it's the greatest thing ever to close deals without attorney. I would say now I don't want to do them again because I don't want to deal with that, and I don't want to have to think in the back of my head if this guy's not happy. Because we made a big chunk of money in the middle that guy's going to come back and sue me for some of it. And if there's no attorney, I think he might actually have a case, as crazy as it sounds, even if he signs an affidavit. So I really think having the seller have an attorney is the best case. If the seller doesn't have an attorney, you should recommend an actual attorney who will represent them. And I think that's how it has to work in New York. It's again, it was when we started, we spoke about how that's a big pain in New York. It is a pain, but it is the way it is, and it's not changing in the state. And I know somebody upstate that was doing things without an attorney, getting people to sign documents saying they're not going to be represented, and how that was going to make things better. But I don't know. I'm not so sure about it anymore. Certainly we're in Long Island where we are, it's not so simple. And I think unless somebody comes up with a better idea, I really think I'm okay with the seller having a representation and having an attorney on, even though it slows down the whole process, even though attorneys kill deals, even though it makes the process of getting into contract a pain in the ass. I think it's the way it has to be. All right.